That is the voice of the Free Syrian Children, and the man with them is renowned Syrian-American composer and pianist Malek Jandali. Through the soft but healing power of music, and in collaboration with organizations such as UNICEF, Jandali has been able to provide a voice to the children of Syria, millions of children who are growing up amid strife and uncertainty. Malek joins us in studio now to discuss this. Malek, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
So I want to ask you so many questions about Syria, but could you start by telling us a little bit about this trip, why you went, and what you accomplished?
It was my moral obligation to meet these kids and shake their hands and look into their eyes. I saw hope and love and harmony. I crossed the borders to meet the future of Syria. And as you know, we are now approaching a harsh winter. You have millions of refugees, mostly our kids, with no food, no medicine. So as an artist, it was my obligation to be the voice of those children and do whatever it takes to save a child.
I mean, 4.25 Syrians have been displaced within the country. The refugee numbers are over 2 million. You talked about getting into Syria, which we've outlined how hard it is for many to get out, but how did you even get in?
I got in with my passport as an American. You know, many courageous Americans cross the borders. You know, one of them we are going to be honoring this Saturday is the courageous American journalist Mary Colvin. We invited her mom. So it's just really the search for truth and beauty, and that's what art is all about. I crossed the borders on one mission, just to meet these children, the future of Syria. It was difficult, it was risky, but it was memorable and it was historic to me.
And what did you see while you were there? I mean, how much have things changed? You know, we often hear about Syria in the media. We discuss it through this chemical weapons lens or this obsession over politics and Qatar and the Gulf and every country that has a vested interest in Syria. But what would you want to share about what you saw there? I mean, you talked about the hope in the kids' eyes. Anything else?
Let me just simplify it.
Please.
It's a peaceful revolution. The kids started it in Daraa, and they were tortured. And that's why you have 14,000 kids that have been slaughtered. It was a peaceful revolution by the children of Syria, and what they were asking, the civilians and the Syrian people, for social justice, democracy, and freedom, and to get rid of dictatorship, so they can have a free elected government. And they were faced with a vicious, brutal war on every angle, using chemical, conventional weapons, you name it. We are crossing the 250,000 civilians being killed in Syria, 14,000 plus children. And that's why I emphasize the peaceful resistance of these children, because children are children.
Of course.
What is more immoral and inhumane than hurting or even killing a child?
Right. No, I completely agree with you. And you know, when you talk about the importance of talking about Syria in the revolutionary lens, that this was an uprising that was popular, that was peaceful largely at the beginning, you've seen the narrative essentially fulfill or kind of become what the government's been saying, which is these are foreign organizations, these are terrorists. And sadly, the reality, as you know, in Syria now is that many foreign militias have come into Syria. You know, 2 years after the war began, or I should say the revolution began. What do you hope will change, and how can this change? Because it seems very pessimistic. For as much as the singing is bringing optimism and hope, maybe you can help inject some of that into a solution.
May I answer on behalf of these Syrian children?
Please.
Not me. They will tell you it's very simple. The equation is free Syria equals the Syrian people minus dictatorship. At the end of the day, the power of people will overcome people in power. We are a civilization of peace and harmony. We invented the alphabet. We invented the music notation. We go thousands of years beyond this regime. This is the Syrian people. I am so proud of my ancestors and of my history, and I am as proud for the future of Syria with those kids. Those kids are free. They're criticizing the killer, the dictatorship. They're exposed now to the United Nations, to UNICEF. They're having the best education rather than memorizing the books of dictatorship, you know?
Of course.
So anyway, it's disastrous, but at the same time it's hopeful. And it is defiant, and the perseverance of those kids, they taught the world a lesson in courage, and they are my heroes. And at the end of the day, we will be free. There's no question about it.
I love your optimism, and more importantly, that you find the silver lining even amidst so much tragedy. I mean, you mentioned UNICEF, and obviously the United Nations has a lot of different organizations that are working inside of Syria, trying to relieve children in particular. Even the UN saying that women and children make up 3/4 of the refugee population. You're talking about injustices for those who are dying, but even those who are forced to flee their homes. I'm a Palestinian originally. I can certainly relate to the tragedy of that. But I'm curious, which organizations not only did you work for, but are really on the ground doing work that you think is important?
You know, in general, I believe the world community failed the Syrian people in giving them a voice and helping them get rid of that dictatorship. On the other hand, you do have these humanitarian organizations, like you mentioned, the UNICEF, the Children for Syria. I work with LIFE, with many organizations.
Mm-hmm.
My concert on Saturday will give you the option to do your own homework and pick the organization of your choice rather than just picking one.
That's amazing.
And it's the voice of the free Syrian children. Those children will not tell you, oh, go only to this organization or that. They will tell you, you know what, we deserve help because it's a humanitarian crisis. Mm-hmm. What we are witnessing, Ahmed, today is a truly daily genocide that is unacceptable anytime, anywhere. And it is our moral obligation as human beings and as Americans, beacons of democracy and humanity and social justice, to stand with the Syrian children and be their voice and stop the war crimes that are committed daily. Even as we speak, I can guarantee you, as we are conducting this interview,
of course,
we have children being slaughtered right now.
So how can music be a statement, be a message, be something that can change and shift perceptions even? I mean, how is it a political statement to you?
Music is a universal language. This is all what I own. I wish I had the world to offer these children and help them in any way, but I don't. I just have my music. And how I view my music is the way I open my benefit concerts. I open my benefit concerts with a piece called Silence by the great American composer John Cage. It's about 4 minutes of silence, and it reminds you what music is all about, the philosophy of music. We are painting on silence. Can you imagine the world without music?
No.
And the Syrian people, my ancestors, invented the musical scales. And music is so powerful because people, even today, after 200 years of Beethoven, for example, his symphonies, it's still affecting humans today. Right. Mozart, who didn't even hear his last 4 or 5 symphonies, his symphonies are still transforming and pivotal in humankind history. Mm-hmm. So to me, music is a unifying force, and it's the soft power of music and art in general, and the mission of searching for beauty and truth, like journalism is, like
right.
Marie Colvin, like artists.
Right.
It's our responsibility just to be on the right course of history and being the voice of these Syrian children.
And when you talk about music, you know, we're talking about it as an art, essentially, an art form that can be very powerful. It can inspire journalists, it can inspire children, hopefully even politicians, for generations, as you say. What do you hope in terms of its ability to unify people? And the reason I ask you about the unity aspect is because in the Arab world, there's so much division these days, and I hate to even say that because that's often how the Arab world is presented. In Syria, even when I speak to friends of mine, whether they're Druze, whether they're Muslim, Sunni, what have you, they are shocked at the divisions that are being created.
Absolutely.
How can music really unite beyond just the abstract?
It's a great question. You know, let's analyze the situation. I think we tend to be self-destructive and self-discriminating as Arabs in general. And there's a great phrase, you know, self-inflicted Orientalism.
Totally.
What I believe music can do is definitely unite. And that's what I did during my trip. I saw in front of me an amazing Syrian symphony of all kinds of Syrians, children, singing Syria, Syria, land of the free, chanting for social justice peacefully.
Things that everyone would want.
Absolutely. On my return to Turkey, crossing the borders, in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, what did I see? A bunch of Syrian children in the middle of nowhere singing Syria, by themselves, and nobody is hearing them. I recorded that. It was just so... It was historical. like the Syrian Revolution.
Right.
You know, the first Syrian Revolution was the invention of the alphabet and the musical notes. We are witnessing now the second historic Syrian Revolution for social justice, democracy, and human rights.
What do you make of how, obviously we talked about journalism a little bit, and that I have issues with the way this has been covered by the mainstream media, even some of my own coverage, I'll be honest with you. But I can only be honest. But in reality, the way Syria is discussed is often as a civil war, as a, you know, this Orientalist narrative fits in and squeezes in there. But even my friends in America who are Syrian have issue with this term civil war. I mean, it's a proxy war, it's a regional war now, it's even a Cold War, arguably, with Russia and the US and Iran and everyone angled. Why does it matter what we call it? And why is it maybe not a civil war?
It matters because we should be truthful, like you said. What is journalism about and arts about? Is about searching for beauty and truth. That's why we have the courageous Marie Colvin dead. I think one American is way too many. And the truth of the matter, even the dictator himself confessed in his interview with Charlie Rose that is not a civil war.
Right.
He himself said that. And you have a witness on the ground. You have a witness who witnessed the Hama massacre in 1982, when his father massacred civilians, I think anywhere between 40 to 60,000 civilians. And you have a witness who crossed the borders and met refugees inside Syria. And what I saw is a vicious war launched by this dictatorship, which, by the way, between us...
And everyone watching.
You know, but between us, it has been listed by the State Department, by our government, as a state sponsor of terrorism since 1979, 34 years ago. So my question to my government, what are we waiting for? We listed the Assad regime as a state sponsor of terrorism. 3 years later, in 1982, committed a horrendous...
atrocities,
and then 34 years later, we are daily genocide. And it's our moral obligation to bring him to justice and stop this humankind tragedy.
It's madness.
It is madness.
It's madness. And music can confront and challenge madness. And I know you have a song that I just want to ask you about between us, personally, about Humps, with the music video. I don't know if we can actually play the music, but the video is so powerful. It's children waking up from a bad dream. And in Arab culture, dreams, like many cultures, play a particular way. We showed this earlier, but the reason I show this in the dream, you know, we have this thing, Al-Hilm Al-Arabi, I think it's a song, the Arab dream, where you had Arab singers from all these countries come together, and yet there are still nightmares like what's happening in Syria. Tell us a little bit about the song and the video. What inspired this?
It's from my album, Emessa, which is the Roman name of Homs, my city, which has been completely eradicated and destroyed by this dictatorship. And the inspiration was the courage of the Syrian children and people. And the story of this music video, Emessa or Homs, is basically how the Syrian children are going to manage to capture the dictator and bring him to justice. He's going to fall into the trap.
Amazing.
And it just exemplifies the power of people. And this is what I said, you know, the power of people is much greater than people in power. And I have no doubt that the Syrian children are going to fulfill that hope through music, through harmony, through being free Syrians. And that's what they are longing for. And music can't be, let's just face it, hope is the reason and music is the way. And I truly believe that. Music is going to probably, I have the solution, it's going to be my music.
So with winter coming, obviously winter's tough even without a war, but it's going to be all the more tough, diseases, the spread of all these things. I mean, how can we mobilize people? How can you really get people involved to make it easier?
It's so tragic, Ahmed, to be honest with you. People are going to face so many diseases and lack of food. People are dying from starvation now, not just by sniper shots and by chemical weapons. Slowly, and it's so painful.
I saw outside just last week of Mu'addamiya, the suburb of Damascus.
Yeah.
They're literally starving to death because they have nothing to eat.
Yep, they just, you know, do a siege on one area and they starve people to death. Women, children, people, even animals. It is unbelievable. To answer your question, what we need to do is to raise awareness. I thank you for your interview, for example. Please come to my concert on Saturday at American Concert Hall. Be involved, be a citizen, be an American, be a human, and be a true, honest artist or journalist and look for beauty and truth like the great Marie Colvin is, like you're doing in your program, like any human being should do. And that's our moral obligation.
Well, if you're looking for beauty or truth, on Saturday you'll find a lot of it. Malek Jandali will be playing, as we mentioned, a benefit concert, The Voice of the Free Syrian Children, this Saturday, October 26th, at the Kaufman Music Center in New York. Malek, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Really inspiring, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. I invite you and the audience to a free concert and a free Syria soon.
I will be there on Saturday and inshallah in Syria as well.
Perfect.
All right, much more HuffPost Live coming up.